Hey guys, Political Junkie 2414 here, and welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be talking about another 2024 Senate race, and giving my in-depth analysis for it, and giving my own personal opinion, and talking about it. Today we're going to be going from we so far we've gone over this is Senate races in Arizona, Montana, and Michigan, and now we're going to be going down to the mountain state of West Virginia, which is very interesting. When it comes, it's a race that I think a lot of people have mixed feelings about, or not mixed feelings, but there's a lot of, generally there's not a great consensus. A lot of people have strong feelings about this race. I think a lot of people kind of, I think there is a consensus as to what is, what the outcome here will be, but it will be interesting nonetheless. And a lot of people have very strong opinions about it. And yeah, you'll see what I mean by the end of the video. But if you're enjoying the video so far, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And yeah, let's get right into it. So, for a little bit of background, West Virginia is a pretty Republican state these days. It voted in 2020. It voted for Donald Trump by 39 points, and as you can see here, if we zoom into the state at large, Trump won every single county here. All 55 counties went for him. The closest one was Mongolia, or excuse me, I do not know how to say it, but it's basically the county where it's near Morgantown, and it was this county that is Biden's best county in the state, but he lost every county nonetheless. And this is not necessarily something that came out of the blue. West Virginia has been a Republican state for years, but it didn't always used to be that way. When you go back further, you see when Bill Clinton was elected in 1992. He won the state by 13 points against George W. Bush, or H.W. Bush, excuse me. And of course, this was with Ross Perot on the ticket, so it was a different climate. There was more vote splitting between the two parties, and in 1996, he won it by 15 points. If we go even further back, you can see that when Jimmy Carter got destroyed by Ronald Reagan in his reelection bid, in 1980, West Virginia was one of the few states that he actually carried. He won it by 5 points. And in 1984, you can see here, West Virginia wasn't all that solid for Reagan compared to other states. You can see Virginia, which is now a blue state, went to Reagan by 25. West Virginia only went to him by 11 points. Most of the Northeast here not very solid for him, and it's interesting to see. 1988, Dukakis won it, but then in the 2000s, something started to shift. George W. Bush was the first Republican to win it since Reagan. He won it by 6 points, but it wasn't necessarily affecting. It was more so West Virginia becoming a swing state. It wasn't a full-on Republican state yet. In 2004, it got redder. Bush won it by 13 points. And then in 2008, even against the odds, even against, Barack Obama's landslide, election victory, and the Democrats doing very, very well in the Senate race there, John McCain won the state by even more than Bush. He won it by 13 points. And in 2012, it basically sealed, Mitt Romney basically, West Virginia basically, confirmed completely that it was a Republican state now. It was, voting for, or at least on the presidential level. Mitt Romney won the state by 27 points, and like Trump, also won every single county in the state. It was, a disaster. It was a historically bad performance for a Democrat in West Virginia, and you might be wondering, how did this happen? Well, West Virginia is a state that's very, very, union. It's very union heavy. There are a lot of union workers there, and a lot of it's a very, very much a working class state. I think you can lump it in to some extent with states like Ohio and Michigan and Wisconsin and Pennsylvania in terms of being very, very having a lot of a lot of working class voters, and especially when it comes to industry. The coal industry is very big in West Virginia, and Democrats started to become more hostile to that, during the 1990s and 2000s. And so I think that some of that is part of the reason why West Virginia became a more Republican state, but it was still voting for Democrats on the Senate level and on the local level. It was, vote in 2000, it voted for Robert Byrd by nearly 60 points. It reelected him in 2006. And in 2008, as I mentioned, Jay Rockefeller won the race pretty easily. But then Robert Byrd died in 2010, and so there was a special election to replace him. And who ran in that special election? Well, Joe Manchin did. He was the governor of the state at the time, and he was pretty popular. He was going up against a pretty, a pretty unpopular opponent in John Race, and he won the race by 10 points, which is more than what was expected. And if you look at the rest of the Senate map here, it was not very good for Democrats. They lost Illinois, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Ohio went to Rob Portman by 17. New Hampshire went to the Republicans by 23 points. It was just a complete blowout. They had better, Democrats did better out here in the West, but in the, Rust Belt, it was pretty poor performance for them besides West Virginia. Um, you know, uh, I don't know if I'd characterize West Virginia as in the Rust Belt. I think it's in that range, but it has very similar. The working class populations and are kind of similar. To that of Ohio and Michigan. It's kind of I you know I kind I kind of would say that they are similar, and that it kind of West Virginia has a reputation for its you know for that is kind of stereotyped. It's kind of stereotyped in terms of those characteristics. But anyways, I'm rambling, and West Virginia continued to reelect Joe Manchin, throughout, it reelected him to a full term in 2012. This was when Byrd's term was supposed to be up, but of course he had died, so Manchin, ran at the 2010 special election to replace him, and then he ran again against John Race again, and he won by 24 points. Now, if you remember, Mitt Romney won the state by 27 points in 2012, so and he won every single county. And Manchin, but on the flip side, in the Senate race, Manchin, almost did the reverse. He almost flipped it on Romney, in that he only lost 3 counties. He basically overperformed Obama in terms of margin, at least by 10, or not 10, more than that, almost 50 points. He won with 60% of the vote. It was a very impressive performance, and if you look at the 2012 Senate map, you can see here. There were a lot of Democrats winning in red states like Indiana, North Dakota, Missouri, something that we don't really usually see nowadays. It was a very interesting time. There was a lot more ticket splitting back then, but, part of the reason why Manchin was doing so well was because he was a moderate to conservative Democrat, and he still is in the Senate. And he was, in an age where, he could do well as a Democrat in West Virginia, even though it was swinging red, on the presidential level, on the Senate level, it was still remaining blue. But then 2018 came around, which was a bluer national environment than 2012 was. And Manchin he lost a lot of ground. He did much, much worse. He only won by 3 points against the Attorney General, Patrick Morrisey, who, in all fairness, he was a strong, and he had a lot of name recognition. He was probably one of the best candidates that could have been fielded, that the Republicans could have fielded against Manchin. But he had a lot of problems in his own right. And when you see that the national environment shifted towards Democrats, you kind of wonder, well, hey, there's this big reduction in his support, in Manchin's support. He didn't even win 50% of the vote. He only got 49.6%, and he lost a lot of counties that he had won in 2012. So, what does that tell you? It tells you that Manchin was vulnerable, and that, the Democratic, and the fact that this was a Democratic wave year, means that maybe he would not have won had he, not been in such a favorable environment. Now, what I will say is that Manchin was the only Democrat who voted to confirm Brett Kavanaugh to the Supreme Court. And I think in some way that may have helped him with his reelection, because other red state Democrats who are up for reelection in a 2018, namely Heidi Heitkamp, Claire McCaskill, and Joe Donnelly, who all voted against Kavanaugh's confirmation, they all lost, and they all lost a lot of support. And that was kind of evident in public polling after Kavanaugh was confirmed to the Supreme Court. I think it was a month before the election, but either way, it really doomed Heitkamp in North Dakota, and in Missouri and Indiana. That was more of a surprise. Those races weren't expected to be as strong for Republicans as they were, but it certainly wasn't something that I think the voters of those states agreed with. Nationally, I don't think that America, the U.S. as a whole was too supportive of Kavanaugh. But in terms of these red states that were electing Republicans, they definitely did prefer them, and I think Manchin made the right call by in terms of his electability. That is, I won't offer my own personal opinion on Kavanaugh in general, but I think that electability wise, it did help him. You can argue that Sherrod Brown voted against Kavanaugh's um confirmation. He was in Ohio, but he was facing a lot of different circumstances. But we'll get to that when we talk about Ohio in my next Senate deep dive video. So, Morrissey, as I said, wasn't the best candidate, but, he was still the attorney general. I think that he was, a lot of people kind of um, you know, a lot of people wrote him off, and a lot of people, now when we're talking about 2024, say that, Morrissey was, the worst candidate that could have been put up. I don't think that's true. I just think that he had a lot of baggage, and, Manchin was still working with a good Democratic environment. But the problem for Manchin now is that he's running in a presidential election year, and he's, likely to face either, a Republican congressman, an 8-year Republican congressman, who who has a lot of support from the far right, or he could face the governor of the state, Jim Justice, who used to be a Democrat. He was elected as a Democrat to the governor's office in 2016, but then a year later, not even a year into his gubernatorial term, he won, or he switched to the Republican Party, and he was reelected easily in 2020. We can look at that right now. You can see here, this was Justice's first election, and he won by 33 points. In 2020, and he also carried every county in the state. Now he didn't perform quite as well as Trump, but Trump was kind of a uniquely good candidate for West Virginia. And yeah, this is the Senate battleground map. And we'll talk about all of these races individually. I know I don't have, Arizona, Montana, and Michigan filled out, but I just kind of wanted to show this to you guys here, although I didn't mean to show it now. But anyways, Joe Manchin also has not even announced if he's running for reelection. It says here that he will not decide whether he is running for reelection until the end of 2024, but I think they mean 2023 because, Manchin said he'd decide in December. He can't really decide at the end of 2024 since that's the year when the election is taking place. And if he does decide to run, Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski, who are both Republican senators, moderate, also known as moderates, in the Senate, who also had Manchin's endorsement, would back him. They've both committed to backing him if he does run. But on the GOP side, we have an interesting primary. As I mentioned, Jim Justice and Alex Mooney are both running for the Republican nomination. Alex Mooney, of course, is the representative from West Virginia's second district. He succeeded Shelley Moore Capito in the House after she ran after she got elected to the Senate. And Jim Justice, is the governor. He's pretty popular. But either way, this is going to be a really interesting race to watch. And the GOP, I think, has been a little worried about the Republican primary in this race, seeing how 2022 went for their candidates and how they're looking for the more electable option. And a lot of people's eyes, that is Jim Justice. You can see here Mitch McConnell, the Senate Minority Leader, has endorsed him. Capito has endorsed him. Lindsey Graham, and the NRSC, which is the National Republican Senatorial Committee. It's you know, the body that's run by Senator Steve Daines right now that's working to get Republicans elected to the Senate, gets a new chair, usually every year. And, they have all come out and endorsed Jim Justice. And on the other side, Alex Mooney has, some more, MAGA, Republicans out endorsing him. Ted Cruz, Rand Paul. I think Mike Lee also endorsed him, but I don't know if that's if that was confirmed. Either way, it's not on on this Wikipedia page, so I won't, don't quote me on that one. But Jim Jordan, you have the West Virginia State Treasurer, the Lieutenant Governor of West Virginia, and you have the Club for Growth. So you have a lot of more far right wing sources, forces that are lining up behind Alex Mooney. And in terms of polling, Jim Justice is doing quite well, but there are a lot of undecided voters here, which makes sense since it's early on in the campaign. I think that the West Virginia primary isn't usually until May of the election year, so a lot of things can change. But it looks like Jim Justice is holding his ground and would according to these polls, do pretty well against Alex Mooney so long as the undecideds come his way. So, yeah, look, I think that, in my own opinion, I do think that Jim Justice will be the nominee, but, things can change. Wacky primary results can happen. I think that we'll have a pretty good idea, though, by the time the primary, rolls around, who's going to be the nominee. Maybe Alex Mooney will shock us and overtake Jim Justice and, kind of win the Republican primary, on more of a grassroots campaign and, making Justice out to be more of an establishment figure. But as of right now, I think Justice is more likely, and I think that's good news for Republicans. I think if you look at the predictions here, Sabato's Crystal Ball and Elections Daily both have the state flipping to the Republicans. And Elections Daily did this after Jim Justice made his announcement because he is doing so well in this polling data right here. You can see, much better than Mooney. Manchin has lost, in all of the polls up against where he's up against Justice, he has only won one, and it was back in January of 2022. But this same pollster also released one in August of 2022 showing him down to Justice by 15 points. This was kind of a high point for Manchin. This is before he voted against the voted for the Inflation Reduction Act, which a lot of West Virginians did not approve of. So that hurt him politically. But if you're looking here at some of these other polls, and you compare them to Alex Mooney's performance, when the pollster asks the voter how would you vote if it was Manchin versus Mooney, they're a lot better for the Joe Manchin does a lot better against Alex Mooney. He's winning by 15 points in this Terrence poll, where he's down by 10 points in this in the same poll against Justice. Now, do I think that this means that Manchin would do significantly better against Mooney than Justice? I'm not exactly sure. I think he would do better. I think Mooney is the less electable candidate. I don't think he has as much charisma as Justice. Not that Justice is a perfect candidate, but he is definitely the better of the two to put up against Manchin, someone who has won statewide before and has proven himself to be really the only Democrat who has a chance in hell winning West Virginia. But you see here, in this coefficient poll, Manchin is leading with 36% of the vote to Mooney's 30%. There's 34% undecided on when it's up against Justice. There's less undecideds. Manchin's not even cracking 30%. Now, do I think he would, only get 29% of the vote? No, I think he'd do a lot better than that. But the fact that there's so many undecideds is mainly because it's so early on in the campaign. That's kind of a rule of thumb with looking at all these different political races. But the fact is that it looks like Mooney is a lot of people are more skeptical of Mooney and might either be voting might vote for Manchin rather than him or undecided. And I think that either way, and if Manchin goes up against Justice or Mooney, he would lose. But I think against Mooney, it'd be more of, a single digit margin. I think he'd lose by 5, 6 points. Against Justice, I think we're looking at more of a 12 to 13, possibly, a larger margin that Manchin would lose by. So when we're looking at the Senate map here, as I've talked about many times, the Senate map is very unfavorable for Democrats. In the battleground column, we have, Nevada, Arizona, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, your typical states. But then you also have Texas, Montana, Ohio, and West Virginia. And you could incorporate Florida, but, I want to wait to see what happens there. It really doesn't seem like Democrats really have anything going for them there just yet. But I do think that West Virginia, as of right now, is a likely Republican state. With Jim Justice, if it's Mooney, I could be convinced to move it down to lean. I think that there would be more upside for Manchin. But either way, we also need to take into account the fact that Manchin's going to be running in a presidential election year, one that even if it might not be super favorable towards Democrats, or even if it might not be super favorable towards Republicans, it's still going to be a better year for them than 2018 was. And Manchin's going to have to overcome a Republican winning West Virginia overwhelmingly. And while I think that he can do significantly better than Biden, overperforming by 40 points is, that's a tall order, and I don't know if he's, good enough to do it with, show, when you look at um, you know, how much ground he lost in 2018. So that's kind of my take on the West Virginia Senate race. The matchup I think will be Joe Manchin versus Jim Justice, and I think Justice would win. If it's Alex Mooney versus Manchin, I think that there's a little bit more uncertainty there, but I would still characterize it as a Republican pickup. And this does help Republicans, and it kind of hurts Democrats, especially if they're having trouble, because this is one of their free, this is one of the free incumbents, in red states. They have to hold on to Montana and Ohio, and keep Republicans from flipping, Nevada, Arizona, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania. Some of those might be easier, than others, but overall, the Democrats have a very, very difficult task ahead of them. They have a lot of work to do if they want to maintain Senate control. But so do the Republicans. Candidate quality matters, and I do think that we could see, we really could see the Senate, go either way in 2024. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And yeah, check out some of my other content if you are interested. Share the video with your family and friends, people who you think would be interested. And check out my non-political channel, Interactor127. And yeah, I'll see you guys next time when I talk about all things politics. See ya.